My name is Reginald Dwayne Betts. I am a poet, a lawyer, the founder and CEO of Freedom Reads. I'm also a job creator. When Freedom Reads started, it was really just a question that I answered. Somebody said to me, what would you do if money wasn't an issue and you wanted to do something for people who are in prison? I said, we put millions of people in prison. I would put millions of books into prison. I explained that I imagined that prison was a kind of glass, and that the people were water, and that we could think about books as ice cubes, and if you put enough books into that glass, the water would spill over. And when the water spills over, we will begin to notice the lives that we have ignored. They said to me, how would you do this? I said I would do it one library at a time. I ended up raising $5 million to do this project. I thought it would be a 3-year project. And so initially we had a team of 3 people. And soon I realized that this project was much, much larger than that. And the only way to explain the project is to tell you the names of the people who do this work with me. Stephen Parkhurst, if you write us and you get a response back, it is because he is organizing a system to ensure that we communicate with everybody on the inside. Michael Bird, he's putting his hands on nearly every Freedom Library that is built. Kevin Baker helps manage our shop, ensuring that we are thinking about what a production timeline is. Jimmy Flynn, he also is putting his hands on every library that is created. I walked into my job one day, and that's how I characterized it. I said I walked into my job one day. I said, Jimmy, how do you like this job? He said to me, I don't have a job. He said, I have a career. David Perez. When we work with the Department of Corrections, it is David that is helping do all of the logistics to make sure that the books arrive on time, to make sure that we know when we need to show up. James Washington is a part of one of our satellite shops in Louisiana, which means that when we build our libraries there and we go into Angola, there is somebody who is close to there that returns. Javon Butler does the same thing. Sherry Crowder and her team of women in New Mexico, they are building libraries with their hands. And when I say they are building libraries, I mean literally that they are taking wood, often wood that would have been discarded, and transforming it into something beautiful. Somebody said to me, why should you put something beautiful in prison? They said, isn't the job to get people out of prison, not to make the conditions of confinement more beautiful? And I thought of everybody that I know who is serving life in prison. This is the thing. Everybody has a story. They have a name that they can name. In prison, they called me Shaheed, number 251534. I was guilty. Tupac has a line. They tell me it's the white man I should fear, but it's my own kind doing all the killing here. I was terrified in prison. And I was terrified of black men in prison. I was terrified of my peers in prison. If it was a knife within arm's reach, it was because somebody was a threat. It is so interesting to stand on this stage today knowing that I was released on March 4th, 2005. And my only ambition was never to return to a prison. I came home, and the day of my release, the first story my mother told me was that she had been raped 3 weeks after my arrest by a black man. Do not tell me that it is poverty that led me into this prison. Do not tell me that it is racism that led me into this prison. Ask me to believe in the same thing that I believed when I was inside, which is no matter how afraid I was, I had to have faith that the men around me will make sure that my 16 years and 125 pounds will make it out of prison. When I launched Freedom Reads, the first thing somebody said to me was, I thought we were supposed to get people out of prison, not make it better. And I said, I've gotten 3 people out of prison. Who have you gotten out of prison? I once had men and women in prison all over this country send me the clothes that they wore over decades, clothes that have become tattered and ripped and torn. And I turned it into handmade paper. I had a friend named Christopher Tunstall. Now, I went to Yale Law School. Yale Law School is the best law school in the country. And I imagined that I went to law school to become a public defender. And I realized I could not stomach the ways in which people wanted to evade responsibility for the crimes that they had committed. And I realized that I wanted to get my friends out of prison. I remember when I got juvie out. Nope. I remember when we were in a cell in Sussex One State Prison, and it was a window that was no thicker than my arm and no longer than my outstretched arm, and we were looking out onto the yard at night, and he said to me, do you think I will ever get out of this? He called it a desperation. Will I ever get out of this desperation? I told him if he gets a GED. And he looked at me like I was all of a fool. But see, I might have been 21 years old. And he reminded me that it was in prison when somebody first called me poet. That it was in prison when somebody first called me an educator. And years later, when he asked me to help him get out to write a letter, I said, I will do you one better. I will represent you. I remember walking the 6900 Atmore Drive with his family on my arms. And I remember losing. Again and again and again. And when I finally got him out of prison, and that is a lie, when the parole board finally said yes, I remember how he died 6 months later. I gave a lot of the letters that he had written me to a friend of mine, and she had turned the pieces of handmade paper into art. And she floated pieces of his letters onto his paper. Paper made out of his clothes, out of the blood, the grit, the desperation that soaks into your skin when you think you will die here. And wildly, the first one of these I picked up. I don't know why he highlighted the last sentence. It said, take care of yourself, homie. But how do you take care of yourself when you cannot let prison go? I named names at the start of this. I said Stephen Parkhurst. He did 7 days shy of 30 years in prison. I said Michael Byrd, he did 17 years. I said Kevin Baker, he did 7. I said James Washington, he did 25 years in Angola. I said Javon Butler, he did 25 years in Angola. Juvenile offenders. On James' birthday, a year after being released, Freedom Reads was his first job. Living wage, 401k plan, health insurance. He said, on my birthday, I want to return to Angola to take libraries to the men that don't have it. This is the thing. We talk about what freedom means. And we imagine that it means liberty, but I realize it does not mean liberty. Freedom means something that's more akin to faith. Freedom means whatever it was that made me. The first decision I made after being sentenced to 9 years in prison was to be a writer. I do not know any writers. What does it mean to hope that you could be somebody in a place where you don't even know if you can be safe? I have so many regrets. I thought my regrets would bury me. And then I realized that I made of my regrets feathers. I carry on the regrets of everybody I know. We do not deserve our liberty. What does it mean to deserve your liberty when you have murdered somebody? What does it mean? What does it mean to deserve your liberty when you have pulled out a pistol and put it in somebody's face and demanded everything they own? I don't ever walk into a room and talk about what I deserve. This is not about what I deserve. Because frankly, name somebody who does not deserve the sword for something that they have done in this world, whether they have landed in prison or not. No. What I talk about is mercy. What I talk about is dignity. What I talk about is what do we as a community of people deserve to give each other, even when the people we are talking about do not deserve the grace and the mercy that we bestow upon them. As of late, it has become so hard for me to believe in what allowed me to survive prison. Somebody said to me, "Who are you?" And I'm like, I'm nobody. Because I did not come anywhere for the kind of applause that I am showered with all of the time. No. I came here to remember one thing. One time I was at Sussex One State Prison. I crossed the yellow line to look at a book. And the sergeant said, "I told you, Betts, about crossing lines." And they put handcuffs on me. And when they opened the cells of the top tier, a man named Kevin Williams pushed his locker out onto the tier and said, "If Shaheed goes to the hole, I go to the hole." And I did not know this man. And then several others said, "If Shaheed goes to the hole, we go to the hole too." And I did not know those men. And the sergeant said, "One time, Betts, go back to your cell." Years later, Kevin Williams found out that I was a law school graduate. He said, "Will you represent me on parole?" I remember going to the parole board to talk about this man. His mother was on my arm, and his mother is blind. He made parole too. And I remember just a couple of months ago when we walked back in the Dillon Correctional Center and Buckingham Correctional Center, and Luke walked in with us, having served 26 years in prisons all over this state. And I watched him be greeted by the staff who welcomed him back, proud that he had made it out and was making something of his life. And I remember every cell block that we walked on, the story that he told. I believe that somehow I have fashioned wings out of all my regrets. And I gotta hope that this room is filled with people who hold on to their regrets, not because their regrets lead to sorrow, but because their regrets lead to an expectation that we are more than whatever landed us in these prison cells. I hope that we all learn how to forgive ourselves. My son said to me when he learned that I went to prison at 5 years old, he said to me, "But Dad, don't bad people go to prison?" And I had no answer for this boy, because bad people do go to prison. You do not end up here because you're black. You do not end up here because somehow, as horrible as the world was, you lost agency. Oh, some of us do. I have wept in my chair for hours listening to the stories that we carry. I have wept in my home for hours listening to the stories that my mother has been afraid to tell me. And yet, sometimes tears grow something like a tree, grow hope, grow possibility, grow a 5-year-old into a child that writes this for his father on a Father's Day when his son needed nothing more than to hear this message. What my father's made of. He is the calming law of the ocean, the serene whistle of wind rattling pines, the confident gaze of the moon on a midnight stroll. There are no dry bones here. The strength of Atlas tempered with the wisdom of Odysseus. A thirst for knowledge befitting Odin. There are no dry bones here. The genius of Isaac Newton paired with a child's curiosity for life. With a heart of gold. There are no dry bones here. My father is my rock, the guidelight that steers me, kind and caring with empathy for others undeserved. The one who showed me my love of words. There are no dry bones here. My father is made of stories. One half of the whole, the most important story he's yet to finish. There are no dry bones here. No, my father's bones, they are made of stories fortified with love, convincing me someday he will soar. Thank you.